So where is BRYAN KOHBERGER right now? That's what people are debating on Twitter. One person is claiming he's already landed in Idaho. Right now it's Wednesday, January 4th, 1:48 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't think he's landed in Idaho yet. Another person is reporting that his plane has touched down at Willard Airport in Illinois for refueling as of 1:38 p.m. Eastern Time. Maybe it's a good thing that people don't know exactly where BRYAN is right now, but what we do know is BRYAN is right-handed. I'm left-handed, I often flail my left hand around. But as we can see from these renderings from BRYAN's extradition hearing yesterday, looks like he's using his right hand and he's still handcuffed, aptly so, in order to sign paperwork. According to Sebastian Robinson, University of Idaho murder suspect BRYAN KOHBERGER is being flown via Penn State Police turboprop aircraft from Pennsylvania to Moscow, Idaho. So apparently they may have done a little stop to refuel. So we've seen more of BRYAN and we're learning more about him. We know that reporters are outside of the Latah County Courthouse awaiting the arrival of BRYAN today. According to Brian Enton, BRYAN KOHBERGER was picked up from the Monroe County, Pennsylvania jail around 6 a.m. this morning. So the process of moving him over to Idaho has started, and people are waiting for BRYAN to get that affidavit in hand so that the rest of us can read it. I really hope it's a long one. We've been currently refreshing these case results in the iCourt portal for Idaho to see when they will add another case for BRYAN, not just his previous Latah County court traffic infraction, minor, not wearing his seatbelt back in August. No, this upcoming case is a lot more serious for BRYAN. But there's one question, there's many questions, but one that keeps reoccurring in my mind and soul and spirit is, did we see BRYAN driving past 1122 King Road on Monday, November 14th, about 24 hours after the horrendous crimes that took the lives of those beautiful 4 University of Idaho students? While we figure out where he is now, let's talk about this, and let's talk about the confusion over whether BRYAN really had a connection with Kaylee Goncalves or not. First off, according to TMZ, BRYAN told his family, "I love you," at his extradition hearing. We can finally know what he was mouthing to his family. As police were taking BRYAN out of the courtroom in handcuffs, BRYAN reportedly turned to his family that were seated right there in the gallery, and we don't have video of inside the courtroom because of Pennsylvania laws. BRYAN mouthed the words, "I love you." And through the proceeding, his parents, his mom and dad, and his 2 sisters, so apparently he does have 2 sisters. I couldn't work out the ages before when I was trying to figure out BRYAN and how many siblings he had. We only saw BRYAN and his sister on that previous bankruptcy report, but I thought, oh, duh, they probably just listed their minor dependents. And if his sister was 18 or older, perhaps she wasn't listed on that report. According to TMZ, BRYAN's 2 sisters appeared upset, along with his parents, crying at times. We got to see more of what BRYAN's dad looks like, Michael KOHBERGER. Now I can confirm BRYAN's dad's face with the Facebook photo I had seen previously, because BRYAN's dad, Michael, also appeared in body cam footage with BRYAN on December 15th when they were stopped twice. I've only seen one body cam footage. I haven't seen the number 1 stop in Indiana.
Hello.
How you doing?
How y'all doing today? Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. You was right up on the back end of that van. Pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay. Cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we're coming from WSU.
What?
And we're scanning early.
What's WSU?
Yeah, I go to the university basically. In real estate. That is SWAT team area.
So we're, okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University?
Yeah.
And you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours to drive. Well, almost a day.
Okay. And what did you say about some SWAT team thing? Or
Yeah,
something?
there was a mass shooting and everything. We don't know if it was a mass
Where?
shooting. This was essentially what ended up happening was
Interesting.
well, it's horrifying because he goes to the universe, you know what I mean?
So y'all work at the university there?
I actually do work there.
Oh,
PhD in criminal
okay. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that incident. Just yesterday, or?
This happened about an hour and a half ago. They're still wrapping it up for investigating. I'm not sure there's two shooters because they did shoot somebody.
I see.
And then we don't know about that actually. They were there for a shooting out of the window or something.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So do me a favor and don't follow too close, okay? All right. Thank you. Appreciate you.
But we saw a really dirty white Elantra they were driving in. After all, they had come, I don't know if they drove nonstop. Did Brian and his dad switch off and just drive all the way from Washington to Pennsylvania without staying in any hotels along the way? That's a long drive.
Should go off the state police, got your license and registration with you. When I stopped you, man, when you were driving by me there, you were a little too close to the back of that semi. About one car between you and the back of this trailer. About one car going 10 miles an hour, so we're going 60 or 70 miles an hour. About 6 or 7 cars. Oh, you guys did?
Yeah, and you said that so
You guys stopped by a trooper? We don't have any SUVs. It was a county guy. Was it like a black SUV?
yeah.
Okay, all right. You thought you guys were following too closely? Okay.
What happened at WSU when my son goes to school shooting?
Today? Well, I'm not going to give you guys another ticket or warning if you just got stopped. Just make sure you give yourself plenty of room, okay? So like I said, it's all about how fast you're going, okay? So if you're going 10 miles an hour, you only need one car. Or if you're going, so speed limit here is 7. If you're going 70 miles an hour, you need 7 car miles. Yeah. That's the easy way to explain it. Right? Yeah. Okay. It's really in the B&B mail, it says 23 seconds. All right. You guys have a safe trip. Where y'all heading?
Thank you so much for stopping.
Where y'all heading to? Huh? Where at? PA? It's a long haul. You guys scared of airplanes? Did you? Okay. All right, well, hey, peace out, safe trip.
Thank you,
See ya.
sir.
But imagine that trooper just there and wishing them a good day because they had been stopped before. Brian was obviously tailgating someone, probably in a hurry to put as many miles between him and Moscow, Idaho as possible. TMZ says Brian locked eyes with his dad, nodding at his dad in acknowledgement yesterday. After all, we don't know if his family will travel to Idaho and how long will they be able to be by his side. We went over their previous bankruptcies. We talked about, I don't think this is a family of a lot of money. I don't know how much they'll be able to, stay by Brian's side because Brian has a public defender waiting for him in Idaho. It's not like he hired some fancy schmancy lawyer to defend him. CNN said that Brian looked back at his dad again, peered over at his family another time, cracking a faint smile. After the judge informed Brian of the homicide charges, his mother broke down and wept in her daughter's shoulder, prompting a court officer to bring over a Kleenex. You just gotta feel horrible for this family. Right now, VineLink in Pennsylvania is still showing Bryan as in custody, but due to current status, updates on this record are no longer available. VineLink in Idaho is poised and waiting for Bryan. His case status is pending. Disposition inactive right now, but pretty soon we should see Bryan pop up in that VineLink in custody in Idaho. Yesterday, January 3rd, Moscow police gave us an update about Bryan waiving extradition, his plans to be returned to Idaho. And once he gets that arrest warrant for 4 counts of first-degree murder in his hand, we'll be able to see the unsealed probable cause affidavit. Again, I hope it's really long. I hope it goes into detail and provides clarity, because right now we're kind of in limbo. Some people are literally claiming, oh, they don't have enough evidence against Bryan. Well, of course, we don't know what evidence they have against him because we haven't read the probable cause affidavit yet. There has been a gag order placed, though. Loudoun County Magistrate Judge Megan Marshall issued a non-dissemination order in regard to the murder case against Bryan. It prohibits any communication by investigators, law enforcement personnel, attorneys, agents of the prosecuting attorney, or defense attorneys concerning this case from speaking out to the public or the press. Now that we know BRYAN KOHBERGER stayed in Moscow, reportedly at least until we see him in Indiana, December 15th, what day did he literally leave Moscow? We have reports of him still taking classes, him still performing his teacher assistant duties, giving everyone 100s, being more animated, but also being more tired and having coffee and everything. We know that Bryan was still in town Monday, November 14th. So that's when this reporter, Andrew Bartline, went live from the scene in Moscow. It was still daytime, and he may have caught Bryan on video. The video is titled University of Idaho Students Found Dead, Now Identified by Police. So there's a reason that a couple of the portions in that video are the most replayed per YouTube. People keep going back and, like I did, trying to scroll and trying to scrub second by millisecond to see if we can see what this car is that goes this way and that way. It's going to appear on the top right-hand side of the video behind the 1122 King Road house. It may be driving on Walenta Drive, and it kind of hides behind a tree, so it's hard to really get a good look at the car. It's a lot cleaner, we know. It looks like it has tinted windows, so we can try and compare it to the body cam footage now that we're getting more data on the car Bryan really drove.
Night of, she says that the next day they saw these police cars out, and everybody in that house, 6 people live there. They've all since gone home. Her and her last roommate were the last 2 to leave. She says that's the same for all the houses in this block, in and around this area of town. These students are going home early for Thanksgiving break after talking with their parents and deciding that that's how they feel most safe and most comfortable. So a lot of people going home early. There is a vigil scheduled for tomorrow at 5 p.m. We know that is confirmed through the university spokesperson, Kyle Faunensteel. So we'll be on site for that as well and bring you the latest there. In terms of what exactly transpired, what led to this, if it was an act of aggression, if it was violent, not a lot of details are getting confirmed right now. We're continuing to push to ask for these answers to find out what exactly transpired to lead to these students' deaths. Doug?
And Andrew, we know that they've said that they no longer need to shelter in place, that kind of alert has been lifted in the sense that there's not a threat to the immediate community. But have you heard anything in your discussions with the police department about a suspect?
No, and I think that's the part that makes this most confusing right now. In terms of information we've been able to get confirmed, the police department does not believe that there is a current ongoing threat. People do not have to shelter in place according to the police, but they also say that they don't exactly have a suspect narrowed down right.
So is it really Bryan returning to the scene of the crime? Taunting investigators, trying to gather information. Did he drive back over there? It was when the reporter Andrew Bartline was one of the first on scene that Monday, returning in daylight to see what the heck was going on at the house. It appears that the car goes that way at a certain portion in the video. About 1 minute and 52 seconds into the original video, And then by the 3-minute, 5-second mark, you see the same car, it appears, returning. That's why people think it may have been Bryan. Was it just a looky-loo? You know, seeing the crime scene tape and the cops and wondering what's going on there, driving back and forth? Or was it Bryan trying to get intel and see what the cops knew and see what was happening? He wouldn't be the first criminal, or would-be criminal if he is found guilty of this crime. He wouldn't be the first to return to the scene of the crime. So I've left a link to the original KTVB7 video if you want to check it out yourself. Now, per the New York Post, Kaylee's parents, Steve and Christy, have been very vocal about their feelings regarding police and everything, but now that Bryan has been arrested, they're looking forward to seeing him in a Moscow court. We weren't sure at first. We thought Steve was going to be over in the Pennsylvania court, but apparently he meant he's waiting for Bryan to return to Idaho to look him in the eye. Their lawyer, Shannon Gray, said it was emotional for them, for Steve and Christy, I'm sure for all the parents. You know, finally, Bryan being captured. You have a lot of anger, Shannon said, and a lot that goes towards something that happened, and now, oddly enough, you can direct those emotions towards someone. They were thankful the police did the job and got a suspect. Indeed. Only when the probable cause affidavit comes out, hopefully, if it provides this level of detail, we will be able to see if, for example, cops were able to track the movements of Bryan early enough to determine if he ever did return to 1122 King and start observing them. But of course, you know, it takes getting all that location data out of the Elantra, processing it. So that might take a while. That's something that might show up in discovery.
He studied criminology and was a PhD student. And some of his classmates have spoken out and said that, you know, he had this fascination with the criminal mind. Obviously, that's what he was studying.
Right, yeah.
But were you shocked to hear about this? And
well, I mean, I obviously you're shocked to find that it's a guy from Washington State University who's a PhD, student in criminology. I think that's surprising. Did I think he was probably an educated guy in some way to pull off a crime like this? Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was somebody that was just, that didn't have an idea about what they were going to be doing that night. So. Yeah, I think where everyone was surprised it was a guy from over in Washington State that was a PhD in criminology and then a undergraduate, I think, in sociology or psychology or something along those lines. I don't like to give weight to any of those guys. I call them defendants now. Like, I don't really want to give weight to his name at all. He's a defendant in a criminal case, and so that's how I'll be referring to him.
yeah.
The attorney Gray said that the family is still holding out for more information to figure out what was Bryan's motive for allegedly committing these horrible, heinous crimes. And Gray is thinking Bryan had an idea of what he was probably going to do. He said, I don't think he was just walking down the street and said, oh, look, here's a house, let me go over there and murder 4 students. I think there's something there, but how that connects with any of the victims, I don't know. And we don't know yet either. Motives are a big deal, he said, when it comes to things like this. People are just mentally ill, and there's no real motive other than they have mental health issues. Now, of course, everyone with mental health issues is not going to commit such a heinous crime like this. But Gray continued, we don't know anything about that or if Bryan just doesn't have the consciousness and they were doing something they wanted to do. You don't need a motive for a conviction. Indeed, even cops in Pennsylvania would not speak to motive. As far as the death penalty is concerned, Gray says, I think it's too early. It's going to be a long process. Indeed, I wonder, with Idaho having the death penalty and everyone's wondering, will Bryan break down, make a confession, work on a plea deal, despite him, claiming he's going to be exonerated? Will he work on a plea deal to avoid the death penalty? I don't know if I see him doing that. He seems cockier than like a Chris Watts was. I don't know if I see him confessing anytime soon. A lot of people are wondering if he's going to try and defend himself, but apparently he has a public defender. He has a defense team that's already working. They're already at the 1122 King Road house gathering evidence. So I think he'll fight this thing through. I think Bryan is the type that thinks he's smart enough to beat this, the type that might even take the stand against the advice of his own attorneys. We'll see. People are already comparing him to like a Darrell Brooks type. Is he going to, try and be this entertaining figure to show off in court just how smart he thinks he is? just how intelligent he thinks he is. Now, in my previous video, we talked about ABC News claiming there were connections between Bryan and Kaylee. So the exact quote was, and I'm not sure if this is just the writer's interpretation of what Kaylee's dad, Steve, said, or if it's something that's true. This is what is confusing a lot of people because we're getting so many conflicting reports, even allegedly from mainstream media sources. The exact quote per ABC News was, Steve Goncalves said, "No one in the family knows or recognizes the suspect, but in the hours since they first learned his name, they are starting to see connections between him and Kaylee Goncalves that they aren't ready to discuss yet." What does that mean? What are those connections? You know, Shannon Gray said, now that there's a person and a name that someone can specifically look for and see if there's any connections in any way, so they're just trying to figure it out. So what are these connections that they are not ready to discuss yet between Bryan and Kaylee? That's how I read that. But now, per Newsweek and other publications are coming out with something that seems to backtrack or conflict from that. Per Newsweek, Steve spoke with News Nation and he was asked directly, did your daughter Kaylee have any connection to Bryan? And Steve said, I'm biased, but if he got to know my daughter, I would think it would be impossible for you to hurt her. So I think a little bit of us all kind of felt like this was somebody who didn't have a chance to meet her, talk to her, get to know her, because she was a very likable person and she didn't have a mean bone in her body. So I think that there's a little comfort in knowing that this person wasn't somebody she trusted and loved.
Impossible for you to hurt her. So I think a little bit of us all kind of felt like this was somebody who didn't have a chance to meet her, talk to her, get to know her, because she was a very likable person and she didn't have a mean bone in her body. So I think there's a little comfort in knowing that this person wasn't somebody she trusted and loved.
So Bryan wasn't someone she trusted and loved, but was he a guy that Kaylee knew? We haven't gotten the black and white answers. We're getting a lot of riddles, and of course, this family is devastated. So you can imagine, and I'm not sure if families are ever placed under gag orders by a judge, but people are trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I hope the probable cause affidavit is in black and white and easy to read, understandable context. So will we learn, yeah, Bryan met Kaylee, or Bryan met Maddie, or Bryan met someone here. Did they ever exchange numbers? Did they ever speak? Has anyone gone out on a date with him? You know, all this confusion leaves room for people to create narratives like, oh yeah, they went out, they had this, they had that, whereas that stuff might not be true. So what is the connection? Is there one? Did they ever physically meet? And of course, it's no victim blaming or shaming or anything if Kaylee ever did actually meet Bryan, if they ever did go out on a date. Of course, none of these victims deserved what happened to them. It's just people are searching for facts, and you're getting a lot of like riddles and speaking in code. So I'm hoping the arrest affidavit clears up some of this stuff. And of course, people, are trying to, what happens in every case, I see a continual pattern where people want to warn others, especially young women, how to stay safe from crime. And some people start interpreting that as victim shaming and blaming. So I see why the family or whomever might want to be a little coy at first. Did she meet Bryan anywhere on Bumble? People are questioning, did they have any other kind of accounts? We don't know. No matter how she met him, if she ever did, that doesn't mean it was her fault. And people just want young women to be safe. So I see both sides. I think about it myself, scrolling through their photos. Of course, all these young people should have been able to post whatever they wanted on social media and not deserve some creeper or some weirdo to stalk them out and try and find where they live or try and harm them. But it is a cautionary tale on how all of us can be aware of who's out there, who might be watching, how to have our own agency, but still try and control who might be watching us. Anyway, per KXLV, Kaylee's dad has said the family feels like a weight was lifted off of them when they heard about Bryan being arrested, and it happened, perfectly on the same day that family and friends were gathering to celebrate the lives of Kaylee and Maddie. Steve said it felt like a cloud was lifted from us. It's like seeing some sunlight after you've been stuck in a house for a month. Now, this publication, KXLY, says Steve said he was unsure if there's a direct connection from Kohberger to the victims, but believes more information will be coming out. That directly conflicts with what ABC News was saying. And maybe Steve just doesn't know what the connection is because he hasn't seen the arrest affidavit. He doesn't know everything the police have. They did a great job about being quiet. I still think sometimes too quiet, because that first alert that went out, that vandal alert, said they were investigating a homicide. That was after 5 p.m. on Sunday, after 5 p.m. Eastern time at least. And I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what if that was Bryan back there driving, past 1122 King Road? And we see the other girls, like the one girl that lived in the house right by 1122 Road. Her mom had called her every hour on the hour because she spent that first night after the crimes right there next to the murder scene. Her mom wanted her to come home. She was afraid, every single noise, and I don't blame her. And I was thinking, what if Bryan was still lurking in that area? But people didn't know. If you hadn't heard it through the grapevine, at least, people did not know there was a homicide of 4 students, mainly until that Monday. So heaven forbid, thank God, Bryan wasn't stalking others and still out there if he's the one that committed this. I'm glad he didn't move on to the next house the next night thinking, well, I got away with that. Let me try another house. So I think there's a balance between what cops can tell the public and what they can't. But thank God they got this guy if he's the correct one. And I believe he is. We just have to say innocent until proven guilty, because that's the law in America. Some people get mad when you say Bryan is innocent. That doesn't mean we don't think he performed the crimes. That means we have to wait for evidence. Innocent until proven guilty, he has to go through due process. That's what it means. That doesn't mean we're on Bryan's side or defending Bryan or something. But Steve said it's up to us as American citizens to make sure we follow this case all the way through and we see some justice and we identify these people and we put checks and balances in there so we can get these people off the streets and just live great lives and not have small few people taking advantage of all of our trust. Indeed. When he says these people, I'm assuming he means all criminals. I mean, there's talk on Twitter of, people can't let go of, did Bryan have some accomplice? We don't know. Per Fox Atlanta, investigators hired by Bryan's defense team arrived yesterday, Tuesday, January 3rd, at the 1122 home. There were 3 men and 2 women who arrived there about noon Eastern time. They spent about 45 minutes taking video inside and outside the property. Imagine when we see perhaps more of that footage. We might not be able to get to see, of course, too much of the defense team's footage. I mean, there was an Idaho State Police trooper that did accompany the group, which is smart to protect them because, people don't understand defense lawyers and they just take their ire out on everyone connected to Bryan. If that trooper did have a body cam, it would be interesting to see that footage, but it reminded me of when Chris Watts' defense team went in the Saratoga Trail house and the neighbors called the cops. They're like, someone's in the house, and then the cops showed up and we saw that footage. But they're saying the lawyer hasn't been publicly identified. And one former homicide detective and attorney, Ted Williams, said the fact that Bryan's attorney has brought in private investigators to go through the crime scene leads him to believe that he's definitely going to mount a strong defense. But per KHQ, it is Ann Taylor, just like the women's clothing store, that has been appointed to be Bryan's public defender as he awaits extradition to Idaho. Ann Taylor is the Kootenai County Chief Public Defender. So this nonstop local KHQ publication reached out to her for comment, but I don't know that she has. Micah 6:8, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So let's hope for some humbling going on and some justice and some mercy for these victims. I'm calling them victors, praying they're all in heaven and experiencing no more pain on this earth. And I pray for their loved ones. as soon as I get my hands on that probable cause affidavit, I will probably read it aloud in a second video. I'm not sure if we'll see it today. I'm not sure how many pages it'll be. You know, we see really short ones. We see ones that are as long as a novel. So it may take some time, but I plan to put it in a separate video. But these are just the updates for today that I wanted to catch you guys up on. Thank you so much for watching.